This video isn't a review, but having said that, there's something about Star Wars Outlaws. Back when it was first announced, I wasn't excited. I wasn't even skeptical. In fact, I don't know where I was or what I was doing. It was just an irrelevance to me. My relationship with Star Wars by this point had gone beyond it's complicated, beyond being an annoyed fan with gripes about the movies. By this point, I had pretty much accepted that I was over Star Wars. I had outgrown it. So when it was announced, it wasn't really anything but background noise to me. I was aware that it was a thing. Truth be told, when I saw it was published by Ubisoft, I shelved it away in my head with an, oh, okay. When I happened upon some screenshots of it on social media, I found myself thinking, that looks kind of beautiful. There's a reason the phrase, "don't judge a book by cover," is a thing. Because as humans, as creatures who naturally use their eyes to gauge things, it's kind of what we do. But the sentiment wasn't lost on me. It was still a Ubisoft game. I had to be sure that I wasn't being duped. So I did something shameful, something unthinkable, something maybe even unforgivable. I gave Ubisoft some money for a game.
What have I done?
Ubisoft is one of those companies, you know, the one from the meme about lowering you into your grave at your funeral so it can let you down one more time. I'm sure we all have these companies that we've, in many cases quite rightly, declared enemies of gamers and consumers alike, that seem routinely more interested in making profits on top of profits than actually making new games. But the very first thing that crossed my mind when playing this, and you may know this if you watched any of my other videos, was the vibe. Star Wars in general has a specific aesthetic to it. It's kind of a Middle Eastern, African, retro-futuristic, grungy, dusty, bleepy, bloopy kind of aesthetic. I am a huge lover of environments. I love sci-fi environments even more, and this game has some that simultaneously feel not only new, but familiar at the same time. It hosts a number of ecosystems that you can explore, each providing you with a different kind of setting. It also seems to borrow from Red Dead Redemption 2, beyond the reference in the name Outlaws. And while it obviously pales in comparison, like virtually every game compared to Red Dead Redemption does, it does try to recreate that same feeling. The wild open, bounties, card games, saloons, calling you a trusty steed, a sneaky rodent-like creature. It even has Deadeye. And that's before you even leave orbit. I'm well aware that there have been games that have already done this feature impressively, but there's just something about walking into your ship, taking a seat, starting up the engine, and flying right up into the atmosphere, and having it melt into space. When I was growing up, we would have needed a separate level or an entirely different game to achieve this. And when you're floating up there, and you hear the sound of a TIE fighter roaring past you, the noise your laser makes when you fire it, it's like your childhood converted into code. The view from up here isn't so bad either. Don't get me wrong, this is not a groundbreaking game. It doesn't have incredible gameplay. The story is fine. It feels Ubisofty, and has the Ubisoft bells and whistles that come along with most of their other games. But a thought formed in my brain as I stood on a ridge with my speeder, watching the two suns set over Tatooine. I thought of what 10-year-old me would have made of this game. A 10-year-old me who repeatedly watched A New Hope, The Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi on VHS, who ate his way through copious amounts of junk food to acquire the entire Tazo collection. A 10-year-old me who broke my mum's ironing board, pretending I was on a speeder on Endor. Sorry, Mum. A 14-year-old me who wrote Star Wars fanfiction that I'm not brave enough to try and go and reread. I thought about how blown that kid's mind would be to be able to explore this world in such fidelity. I had my fill of Star Wars games growing up. I played The Phantom Menace on the original PlayStation, slaughtering kids and old women on Tatooine. For some reason I remember walking up to a dingy apartment, and there being a pot boiling. I remember going to the cantina on Taris in Knights of the Old Republic. These environments were special to me, because they felt like I was inhabiting and interacting with places previously only in fiction. The movies had incredibly talented people working their magic to create a believable world, and there are people working that same magic, but on a completely different scale in an entirely different medium. So, why does it also feel different for other reasons? The Star Wars games I played back in the day had glitches, with infuriatingly stiff, unresponsive gameplay, low poly, low res, and honestly, some of the most god-awful missions, and I still love them. And now you're telling me that we live in a world where we can traverse planets in 4K, where we can simulate the time of day and watch the sun crawl across the sky as it changes? Where we can use blasters like from the movie to engage in battles with near photorealistic stormtroopers. But despite all of this, why do I feel like I have more scrutiny for this? Than this? The obvious answer would seem to be, you were a kid. You don't really think about these things when you were a kid. You don't really think about writing, narrative arcs, animation, polygon count, budgets. But I get it. Ubisoft are a company fraught with real issues, and hell, they may decide to can future games like this for only making them $300 million instead of $400 million. And I have no doubts that companies will continue to drill into the Star Wars well. They know it works for people who grew up on it. It's a taser barb stuck in our skin, and they have their finger on the trigger. I mean, it worked on me. I'm making this video. They know we are nostalgic for a time when things were simpler. The whole raison d'etre of Star Wars is good and evil, light and dark. But as we get older, we realize that things are often not one or the other. Most things exist in the space in between. Maybe these companies also want us to be nostalgic for a time before we question the ethics of those responsible for the games they produce. But among all of this, I also think about the passionate individual developers, people working within these confines to give us worlds that we literally wouldn't have been able to envisage as kids, people who I am linked to through the same childhood wonder of this universe. Though it may have faded, never really went away, and I do want to appreciate them for that. Many of us probably have Star Wars to thank for sparking our love of sci-fi, movies, and even games. Star Wars is ingrained in our culture by this point, and the thing about culture and childhood memories is they're not always great. They ebb and flow and change, but we do tend to value the most enjoyable parts of them. Maybe that's what I'm doing with this game. In a way, coming back here feels like coming home. As ridiculous as this may sound, when I first thought of what 10-year-old me would have made of Star Wars Outlaws, I wanted to go back in time and give him the chance to experience it. That was until I realized he just had. If you're still with me, thanks for watching the video. One important thing I should probably mention is that I bought the Ubisoft Plus subscription for $14.99 a month to play this game. I did not pay the full price. And honestly, I have never in my life bought a Gold Deluxe Ultimate Season Pass edition of anything. So I'm well aware this may have changed my experience, but nonetheless, it's nice to have just a nice experience with the game. Anyway, that was my Star Wars video. I'm probably going to come back to this in 20 years and put in some CGI aliens with lips. Anyway, that's the end of the video.